gray car was parked across from my building for at least 2 weeks before I connected it to her. I only know that now because I started keeping track. After my sister called, after I went back through everything and tried to map out when it actually started. Her name was Mara. I matched with her on Tinder on a Tuesday night in early October. 4 photos. A rooftop bar, a hiking trail with serious elevation, a casual selfie, a birthday dinner with friends. Her bio said she was a graphic designer who made really good homemade pasta. Normal profile, easy to swipe right on. We talked for 9 days before meeting. Real conversation. She asked follow-up questions, remembered things I said 2 days earlier, didn't disappear between messages. By the end of the first week, I was looking forward to her texts in a way that surprised me a little. We met at a coffee shop in East Nashville on a Saturday afternoon. She was already there when I arrived, jacket still on, sitting by the window. She smiled when she saw me come through the door. We stayed for 2.5 hours. Work, travel, bad date stories we both had too many of. I drove home thinking it was the best first date I'd had in a couple of years. We went out twice more after that. Both times easy and relaxed. The kind of early dating that makes you stop checking the app for other matches. On the third date, she mentioned she'd looked me up on LinkedIn before we first met. I said I'd done the same. She laughed and said she liked to know who she was sitting across from before agreeing to it. Reasonable, normal. Then she said the name of a coworker of mine, someone from a job I'd left 3 years prior. She said she'd seen we were connected and thought it was a small world. I nodded and agreed it was. But I hadn't told her where I used to work. Not the company name, not the industry, nothing. I let it go. Told myself I must have mentioned it somewhere without realizing. The following week, she brought up a neighborhood I'd lived in 4 years ago. Said she used to run routes near there, that she might have seen me at the coffee shop on the corner. She smiled like it was a fun coincidence. I smiled back. But something in me went still. Over the next 2 weeks, I started cataloging everything. She knew which gym I went to. I had never said the name, not once, not even vaguely. She knew my car was silver, even though I always parked a full block from her building because street parking near her place was impossible. She knew I had an older sister. I had never mentioned a sibling in any conversation, not in 9 days of texting and not across 3 dates. I went back through every single message between us, looking for anything that could explain any of it. I read them twice. Nothing matched. Not the gym, not the car, not my sister. I asked her directly one evening, kept my voice as casual as I could manage. "How'd you know I drive a silver car?" She tilted her head slightly and said I must have mentioned it at some point. Then she changed the subject before I could respond. That night I checked my Instagram. It was public, had been for years without me thinking about it. My gym had tagged me in a post about 8 months back. A group class, my name in the caption. My car was visible in the background of a photo from the previous winter, silver paint catching the light, parked in front of my old apartment. So explanations existed for both. But they required her to have gone back months deliberately, to have known what she was looking for, to have searched my name in a gym's tagged posts. That's not something you do while casually checking someone out before a date. That takes time and a specific reason to be looking. I stopped responding to her texts. She sent 3 messages over 2 days asking if something was wrong. Then one more saying she hoped she hadn't done anything. Then silence. 3 weeks later, my sister called. A woman had messaged her on Facebook introducing herself as a mutual friend trying to reconnect with me. My sister has a different last name. My Facebook was private and hadn't been active in years. My Instagram listed no family. There was no visible thread connecting them. I started watching the gray car after that. I could place it now. It had been parking across from my building regularly. One evening, I watched it from my window for 25 minutes without it moving. Then I went downstairs. I walked toward it directly. It pulled away before I reached the curb, not panicked, just smooth and immediate, like whoever was inside had been watching the building entrance the whole time. I got a partial plate. I gave it to a friend who has access to registration records through his work. He called me back 3 days later. The car was registered to a woman in Brentwood, first name starting with M. He wouldn't give me the full name without more cause. I broke my lease and moved out 6 weeks later. I didn't wait for the month to end. The first wrong thing was the booth. I didn't register it at the time, that he'd chosen the one spot in the bar with no view of the door and no easy way out if you were sitting on the inside. I was on the inside. His name was Derek, 34, worked in freight logistics, standard profile, a photo with a golden retriever, one that looked like Southeast Asia. We matched in late February and talked for 10 days before meeting. First date was a bar in Midtown on a Thursday. He was quieter in person than over text, measured, like he chose his words before he said them. He walked me to my car when we left and texted when I got home to make sure I'd arrived safe. At the time, that seemed considerate. Second date was dinner at an Italian place. The conversation was decent. He paid and mentioned it twice, once while the bill was on the table, and once as we were putting our coats on. I didn't say anything. At dinner, he asked detailed questions about my schedule, which days I worked from home, whether I usually went out on weeknights or kept that to weekends. I assumed he was trying to find a time for a third date. I answered honestly. For date 3, he picked a bar in a neighborhood I didn't know. I looked it up beforehand. Fine reviews, nothing alarming. I texted my friend Kayla the name and address and told her I'd check in by 10. He was already there when I arrived, in a booth at the back. Away from the bar, away from the windows, away from the other people. The place was quieter than I expected for a Saturday night. I slid into the seat across from him. Within the first 15 minutes, he said my friend Jess's name. I had mentioned the falling out on our second date, briefly, vaguely, said a friendship had ended badly earlier that year and moved on quickly. I never gave a name. I was absolutely certain of it. I kept my face neutral. I kept talking. But everything I said after that, I said carefully. He went to the bathroom and I reached into my bag. My phone was in the side zipper pocket. I used the main compartment every time, without thinking. Every time. I left the phone where it was, and said nothing. He came back and sat closer than before. Said he liked that I seemed like a consistent person, that he could tell I was somewhere specific every Thursday evening. Said it pleasantly, like a compliment based on observation. I asked what he meant. He said I just seemed like someone with good routines, that he could tell from the way I talked about my week. I had never described a Thursday routine to him. Not in 10 days of texting, not at dinner, not once. I excused myself to the bathroom and texted Kayla the exact address. Told her to call me in 4 minutes with something urgent. She called. I said there was a situation with a family member, left cash on the table, apologized, and walked toward the exit. He was in the parking lot when I got outside. Standing near the entrance, not at his car, not moving toward anything, just positioned there, where he could see anyone coming out. He said he'd wanted to make sure I got out okay, that the neighborhood could be rough at night. He was smiling, completely relaxed, like this was a normal thing to do. His car was backed in directly next to mine, not how it had been when I arrived, positioned to pull out fast in any direction. I have no idea how he'd gotten outside ahead of me without me seeing him leave the booth. The bar had one exit. I had been watching the room. I kept my voice completely even. Said thank you, got in, locked the door the moment it closed, and pulled straight out of the space without looking at him again. I called Kayla and stayed on the phone the entire drive home. I checked my mirror every 30 seconds. A silver sedan held the same route for 7 full blocks before it finally turned off. I don't know if it was him. I don't know that it wasn't. I filed a report with a non-emergency police line the next morning. They logged it and told me to call back if contact escalated. He texted twice more over the following week. I didn't respond to any of it. I still don't park in the same spot 2 days in a row. I take different routes. I check my bag before I leave anywhere. Some adjustments you make, and then you just keep making them. She already knew which floor I lived on before I ever told her. I figured that out 2 weeks after everything ended, when I was going back through the timeline trying to find the edges of it. Her name was Claire. I matched with her on a Sunday evening in mid-March. Registered nurse, distance runner, Sunday cooking. 3 photos. Rooftop with friends, hiking trail, something that looked like a hospital charity event. Everything in the profile read as grounded and real. We talked for 5 days before meeting. She was direct, easy to talk to, made a joke on day 2 that actually made me laugh. By the time we planned the first date, I was genuinely looking forward to it. We met for lunch near the medical district on a Wednesday. On time, simply dressed, easy to sit across from for almost 2 hours. She hugged me on the way out. I drove back thinking it had gone well. She texted that evening. We set a second date for the following Thursday. She was different when Thursday came. Not dramatically, just slightly off in a way I couldn't name right away. Shorter answers, phone face up on the table, eyes that didn't stay on mine as long as they had before. I asked if work had been hard. She said rough couple of days and left it there. She left quickly after dinner. She texted the next morning like nothing had shifted, made a comment about the food, asked when I was free. For the third date, she suggested coming over to my place. I had mentioned my cross street once during a conversation about running routes weeks before. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. She brought wine. Seemed relaxed, more like the first date than the second. We sat in the living room and talked for a while. At some point, she excused herself to use the bathroom and was gone noticeably longer than made sense. When she came back, she stopped in the hallway and looked at a photo on my shelf. My mother and me, at a family birthday a few years back. She asked my mother's name. I told her. She said it back once, quietly, like she was placing it somewhere internal and filing it. I told myself some people are just like that, curious, detail-oriented. 4 days later, my mother called me. A woman had messaged her on Facebook and introduced herself as a close friend of mine. Said she was trying to plan something for my birthday and didn't want to spoil it by asking me directly. My mother, being exactly who she is, had written back warmly. She confirmed my birthday. She mentioned the trip we were planning to visit my aunt out of state that same month. I called Claire that evening. No build-up. I just asked whether she had messaged my mother. There was a long silence. Then she said she'd only been trying to do something thoughtful. Her voice was completely flat and even the whole time. No stumbling, no embarrassment. Not a single word about how she'd found my mother's profile. A normal person falls apart in that moment. She didn't move at all. I told her I didn't want to continue. She said she understood and hung up. No questions, no pushback, no reaction. Just the line going dead. 3 days later, I came home to find my doormat moved. I know exactly where I keep it. Same spot for 2 years. It had been shifted about a foot to the left. Nothing inside was disturbed. The lock had no marks. But someone had stood at my door long enough to move something, and leave. I called the building manager and asked him to pull the hallway camera footage from that afternoon. He called me back an hour later, and the way he said my name when I picked up told me something was wrong before he got to the next sentence. The camera covering my floor had been manually tilted upward. It was pointing at the ceiling. Maintenance confirmed no one had been scheduled to touch it. There were no work orders, no logged access to that panel. Someone had reached up and moved it deliberately, which takes about 4 seconds if you know what you're doing. She had been on my floor. She knew which one it was before I ever said it. I went back and found the moment. An offhand comment I'd made weeks earlier about taking the stairs instead of the elevator, because our floor's elevator button sticks. Our floor. 2 words. I'd said it without thinking, in the middle of a longer sentence, and I had completely forgotten I'd said it at all. I had the lock changed within 48 hours, and gave her name and photo to the front desk. Some things you can't prove enough for anyone else to act on. You just carry the knowing, and you get careful in ways you never put back down.